The Next Right Thing, written by Thunderrrstruck, posted on Archive of Our Own, read by Lillian Stark. You don't have to do this. The words ringing in his head were as hollow as the hole in his heart. Tony lifted his hand but held himself back from knocking. The guilt corroded him from the inside out. It had been eating him alive the entire month he spent in space. While he could and did fake a smile for Nebula, his heart had begun to flake the moment he had turned on the spot on Titan and seen Peter Parker disintegrate before his eyes. Since then, his heart beat like a whisper. Tony swore not to close his eyes again. If only his basic biology would let him keep that promise. He had slept 5 hours more each night than he wanted to, which is to say, he averaged 5 hours. Meals he kept light. Work, it pained him to detach from. Pepper, he thought about constantly but ignored for the blame burning in his head. He didn't want to hurt her. He couldn't not stop working. It was the same problem as it had always been. Detaching from distraction proved to be Tony's greatest hurdle. In the end, it wasn't Thanos. In the end, it was his inability to forgive the one person he had to live his entire life with. Come rain or storm or shine. Himself. According to Pepper, 1 month was too long for self-loathing and guilt stewing. That was how long it had been since his rescue by Captain Marvel. She had traveled down to the garage and told him to take a step forward. She had taken one of his hands in hers, steered him upstairs towards the coat rack, and only let go when they stood in front of the door. You have to. A stark change in mind from her sentiments 1 month ago, the week after he landed. For both your sakes, you have to tell her. What if I can't? He had said. Seriously, what if he saw May and immediately collapsed? His heart might give out. He knew it couldn't take much more. It has to be you, encouraged Pepper. This is one step forward, the right one. I promise you that. She had kissed him on the forehead, helped him with his coat, and brought him to the car. She drove. Tony didn't trust himself behind the wheel in his state. But when they arrived, he told her to wait in the car. This had to be all him and only him. He hurried up the stairs. He stood in Queens now in the familiar halls of an apartment complex in front of May Parker's quarters. He didn't close his eyes. He just knocked. 3 solemn taps evoked no answer. So he waited. He could knock again. He could call through the wood, but he suspected neither option would be reciprocated kindly. The least he could do was pay her in patience. Patience wouldn't bring her nephew back, but with the grieving, they needed space. Finally, it cracked open a few inches. Glasses magnified a brunette's narrowed eyes. Then they expanded with recognition. An attractive brunette dragged the door further back, widening the hole in the wall. Miss Parker, he greeted as professionally as he could. Yet there was no helping the glossy sheen of his eyes. That became a permanent as of 2 months ago. When their eyes met, May knew. He knew that she knew. She was piecing the puzzle parts together for the entire image. A hand reached up to cover her mouth. How did it happen? Was all she asked. I didn't want him there, but we tried to stop it. We couldn't. Half the universe. Not only did Tony pay over 3 seconds of thought to his time on Titan, but he shut his eyes, unable to take her watery gaze any longer. An orange sky, rubble walks, a hand, let him go. Snap, light, flaking. He caught himself on the doorframe just in time. Never, Tony warned himself mentally. Never close your eyes again. I'm sorry, he said, barely above the volume of a draft of wind. Nothing louder was doable, let alone appropriate. May lowered her hand and, unexpectedly, reached it forward. He thought for sure she'd lash out in hate. She had every right to blame him. Tony flinched as her hand came to rest on the arm just below his shoulder. Why wasn't she angrier? If he weren't drowning in guilt, he might have noticed how overly rigid her fingers felt, or her shoulders appeared, how gaunt her eyes and firm her jaw was. But in his moment, she just looked strong. Did he suffer? Her lip trembled, uttering the last word. I don't want to go, please. Tony shook his head. The memory was his alone to bear. His fault meant his burden. I wish it were different. I wish he were here instead of me. May bore her understanding through tears rolling down her cheeks. She bit her lip and shivered her head up and down. When she spoke again, her voice could have rivaled the void of space in terms of quietude. I know, Tony. I do.